Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and I think we're ready to jump right in. All right, folks, a formal welcome to Daily Power Parsha, December 15th, 2020. All right, this day today is Tuesday, which means we are going to cover the third reading of Miketz to recap all of the fun that we explored yesterday. So Joseph had been languishing in a dungeon prison in Egypt for 2 years, framed for a crime that he did not commit. And due to his dream interpretation prowess, he was remembered by the butler whose dream Joseph had interpreted, and his contact information. He was networked with Pharaoh, who had his own 2 dreams to figure out. And that was, wow, sounds like a fighter jet, Matt. And that,
I try to figure out what this is. Let me go on mute.
No worries. Let us know, because it sounded awesome. Who remembers, by the way, a few months ago, remember they did the fighter jets one Saturday morning? Like randomly, remember that? Over Atlanta? Whatever. The kids enjoyed it.
It was for the healthcare workers.
Oh, was it for the healthcare? Okay, got it. I wasn't sure until now what it was. That's cool. That's great, actually. My kids loved it. I loved it. It was great to see them. All right, so this was before Shul had reopened. We were davening at home, and I remember going outside, seeing the whole display. Getting back to Joseph. So Pharaoh has his own 2 dreams about cows and ears of grain, and he can't figure it out. He's disturbed. He feels like it's something big, but he's not sure what's going on. So the butler says, I got a guy. I know a guy. He once did some dream work for me. He's like, he did some dream interpretation. You should call him. So they bring out Joseph, and Joseph kills it. Joseph gets it done. He nails it. He's right on point. 2 dreams are really 1 dream. It's the same point. 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. The famine is going to be so bad, it'll be like the 7 years of plenty never existed. You got to prepare now during the years of plenty for the years of famine. You need to appoint someone who's qualified to do it. And Pharaoh says, who else is more qualified than this guy right here, than Joseph? That takes us to reading to reading number 3, Genesis chapter 41, verse number 39. Here we go. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has let you know all this, there is no one as understanding and wise as you. And I love how Joseph's lexicon has rubbed off on Pharaoh. Joseph said, when he was asked, can you interpret a dream? He said, look, it's not me, it's God. God has the answers. If I'm blessed with insight, it's going to be divinely ordained, but it's really coming from God. That's what Joseph tells Pharaoh. When Pharaoh is commenting on Joseph's brilliance, look what he says. Since God has let you know all of this, there's no one as understanding and wise as you. Attributing the understanding and the wisdom to a divine blessing. Again, Joseph's framing of his intuition about that being divinely ordained is rubbing off and having an imprint on how Pharaoh thinks and how Pharaoh speaks. Since when would Pharaoh of ancient Egypt talk about God? Since God has let you know all this, well, he's not using the word God. In the language of the Hebrew here, it's Elohim. He wouldn't use that. But once Joseph shares that idea, Pharaoh's on board. Let's continue. Here's what Joseph says. You shall be appointed over my household, and through your command, all my people shall be nourished. Look at that. In other words, what he's saying is you're going to be in charge of all the food during the 7 years of plenty. No one's going to eat without you. Only with the throne will I be greater than you. Pharaoh says you're second in command. You're in charge of the entire palace. You're in charge of all of the food and all of the economy at that point. The only thing that's above you on a power level is the throne. By the way, I need to mention this right away. Pharaoh says to Joseph, and this is brought down in our sages, the Midrash. Let's see if Rashi says something. Give me a moment. Second. No. Okay. So I'll share with you what the Medrash says. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see all of you. Medrash says that Pharaoh asked Joseph, look, if I'm going to point you to this position of second in command, you need to be a master of languages. That was a thing back then. You had to know languages. This is before Google Translate. This is before, whatever. This is before apps that could do all the translating for you. If you were in charge of a nation, you had to be proficient in languages. So Pharaoh tests Joseph, and Joseph passes with flying colors. He understands all of the languages that were needed, all of them that were needed at that time. And then Joseph says, you done? Pharaoh says, yeah, test is over. He's like, but you didn't ask me about one language. He said, which one? He said, Hebrew. He says, you know Hebrew? He says, yeah. Remember, I'm a Hebrew, right? So I know Hebrew. It's my native tongue. Pharaoh did not know Hebrew. And the law would have been that the one who knows the most languages, he should be the one that's really the king. So Pharaoh made a deal with Joseph. Pharaoh told Joseph, keep it on the down low. Don't let anybody know that you know one more language than I do. I'll make you viceroy, second in command. You'll be in charge of a lot of things. Don't let anybody know. Promise to me that you'll keep this secret safe, that you know one more language than I do. Joseph said, yes. By the way, this comes into play in a few Torah portions from now, when the whole family has moved down, again, fast forwarding, just for the context of this idea that I want to share with you. Fast forward, a few years, and now the whole mishpacha, the whole family of Joseph, his father Jacob and his siblings and all their kids, the whole Jewish family totaling at that point 70, parents, children, grandkids. So the family of 70 is now down in Egypt. And eventually the Torah tells us that Jacob is getting older and he's going to pass away. He calls his son Joseph and he tells Joseph, don't bury me in Egypt. When I die, says Jacob, the father, to Joseph, the son, the viceroy, do make sure I'm not interred in Egypt. Take me back to Israel, to Hebron, to the cave of Machpelah, where my father and mother and grandfather and grandmother, where the whole mishpacha is buried. Take me to the cave. Joseph says, sure. Jacob says, no, promise you'll do this. Joseph says, okay, I promise. I won't bury you in Egypt. We'll take you back home for burial. Thank you. Well, when Jacob passes away, and Joseph comes to Pharaoh and says, I gotta take my father. I gotta take his remains back to Israel. Pharaoh says, no, you're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. Since the moment Jacob came down, there's been a blessing. Oh, I don't want to give away too much of the story, but when Jacob moved down, which was 2 years into the famine, so there were 7 years of plenty, followed by, there was supposed to be 7 years of famine, but 2 years into the years of famine is when the family moved down. The moment Jacob moved down, the famine stopped because he was such a tzaddik, he brought a blessing to the land. So Pharaoh says, you want to take your father after he passed away and bury him in a foreign country? He's been too much of a blessing. I want him buried right here in Egypt. And Joseph says, I promised my father. And Pharaoh says, break your promise. And Joseph says, if I'm a guy who breaks promises, remember the whole language thing? Right? Remember that whole language thing, how I know one more language than you do? Right? When you originally appointed me viceroy, which we're reading about right now in this Torah portion, remember I knew one more language and you told me to promise that I wouldn't reveal that? Do you want me to start breaking promises? Because if I'm breaking a promise to my father, I might also leak to TMZ that I happen to, whatever it was then, I might also happen to leak the fact, BuzzFeed, that, I also know one more language than you. And Pharaoh says, okay, you can bury your father, no problem. That's how this story has a ripple effect later on in the evolution of the story and later on in history. Okay, let me share. So hold on, before I share my screen, let me check in. Does that make sense? This narrative, how it comes together? Okay, good. Let me share my screen with you again. Okay, here we go. Let's continue with verse 41. All right, so Pharaoh said to Joseph, look, I've appointed you over the entire land of Egypt. Not bad for a nice Jewish boy who was a slave and then a prisoner. And just because he knew some dreams. 42, talk about riches to rags to riches story. Verse 42, and Pharaoh removed his ring from his hand, and he placed it on Joseph's hand, and he attired him with raiment of fine linen, and he placed the golden chain around his neck. Basically, Pharaoh is adorning him in royal garments and royal jewelry. Now, raiment, right, means a garment. It's not ramen, which is a noodle. I'm just clarifying. It's not ramen, it's raiment. Ramen, I'm sorry. There you go. I knew it was, all right, it's not ramen either. Okay, good. Verse 43. And he had him ride in his chariot. Look at that. Nice Jewish boy named Joseph riding in the royal chariot. He made him, and he had him ride in his chariot of second rank. So it's not the first one, but it's the second, second position. And they called out before him, this is the king's patron, appointing him over the entire land of Egypt. In other words, it wasn't the quiet appointment of Joseph as viceroy. It was a public situation. They rode him through the streets of Cairo or whatever was the capital then. They rode him through the streets and in the chariot, and they announced before him, this is the king's avrech, this is his patron, this is his right-hand man. And that was a public proclamation of Joseph's power. Let's continue. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh. Don't forget, I am Pharaoh. And besides you, no one may lift his hand or his foot in the entire land of Egypt. That is pretty remarkable, that line right there. I am Pharaoh, which means that what I say goes. And what I say is that besides for you, or without your permission, no one should move their hand or their foot. In other words, no one does anything without consulting you. Not with money, not with commerce, not with economy, not with food, nothing. Nothing happens without your consent. And Pharaoh gave him a new name. Listen to this. Pharaoh named Joseph, well, I don't know how to pronounce it in English, Tzafnat Paneach, or Zaphanath Paneach. Zaphanath. Zaphanath sounds like what our fellow Ari Saster spoke Saturday night, the rocket scientist, about the Vulcan phalanx that the U.S. has developed, the missile defense system. Zaphnath Paneach also sounds kind of cool. It's a cool name. Zaphnath Paneach means revealer of secret things. That's what that means in a foreign language. Zaphnath Paneach means revealer of hidden things. On a simple level, it's because he revealed the hidden secrets of the dream. And in general, he was a deep fellow, was Joseph. And he gave him, listen to this, and Pharaoh gave him Asnat, the daughter of Potiphera, the governor of On, for a wife. So Pharaoh was a matchmaker also. Who knew? You didn't need an app then. You didn't need a website. Done. Pharaoh would match you up. So Pharaoh says to Joseph, I know a girl. Her name is Asnat. She's fantastic, from a great family. By the way, who was her father? Potiphar. Remember the guy who he was working for? Who was her mother? Yeah, you got it. The lady that had him thrown in prison, falsely accused of assault. That was his mother-in-law. Complicated Thanksgiving table. I'm just saying, that was a very complicated family. That if you think your family is complicated, try on some of Joseph's family right there. Try on some of that for size. By the way, this leads our sages to conclude that Potiphar's wife, who was trying to get with Joseph, if you know what I mean, for a long time, listen to this will blow your mind. According to the commentaries, according to our sages, according to our tradition, she had a higher intent. She had a divine intent. L'shem shamayim niskavna. She had the intention for a greater cause. In other words, she saw through whatever spiritual means that she had at her disposal. She foresaw that Joseph would have children that were descendants of hers. So she thought she has to make it happen. Little did she know it was her daughter. That's what our sages say. Does it make it less complicated? I don't know. It's still complicated. Either way, Joseph ends up marrying Potiphar and Potiphar's wife's daughter, Asnat. All right. Again, just, imagine that. And Joseph went forth. Can you imagine the daughter coming home one day and being like, I met a guy? Imagine that conversation. I met a guy, really nice guy. What's his name? Joseph. Imagine the parents be like, what? Joseph? At this point, though, he wasn't a slave anymore. He was second in command. And publicly he was, I can't say coronated because that's for the king, but he was publicly appointed. All right. Everybody knew Joseph. Everyone wanted to be Joseph. Joseph went forth over the land of Egypt. All right. He led the land. And Joseph, wow, how old was he? Joseph was 30 years old. Look at that. Young man. Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from before Pharaoh and passed through the entire land of Egypt. He was a man who was hands-on. He was not sitting behind some desk somewhere in Cairo. He was hands-on. He was with the people. He was passing through the land. He was taking care of business and even possibly working overtime. All right, now, one thing that I need to mention is Joseph was 30 when he stood before Pharaoh. How old was he when he was sold as a slave? You might remember I shared this with you. 17 years old. 17 years old when he was sold as a slave originally by his brothers and went down to Egypt. 13 years later, the unthinkable happens. Joseph is the viceroy. That's a pretty big turnaround. And we've discussed the key to the success, right? The key to the success is number one, God's in control. Number two, God's in control. And number three, you guessed it, God is in control, which means that God is doing the orchestrating. God is doing the maneuvering. If I'm here, it's divinely ordained, and God will give me the gifts and the tools that I need to address the situation. And if I do succeed, it's not my success, it's God's success. That's the key to Joseph's success. Let's continue. Verse 47, and in the 7 years of plenty, now back to the story, right? In the 7 years of plenty, listen to this, the inhabitants of the land gathered food by the handfuls. There was so much food. It was like everywhere. And Joseph, 48, Joseph collected all the food of the 7 years that was in the land of Egypt. And he placed food in the cities, the food of the field surrounding the city. And he placed food in the cities, the food of the field surrounding the city, he put within it. He basically had storehouses of food. Let's see if Rashi clarifies that seemingly complicated sentence. Let's see, hold on. Let's oh, this is great. This is fantastic. Take a look at verse 48. Because each land preserves its own produce, they would put into the grain some of the soil of the place, and it would preserve the grain and prevent it from decaying. How did they save the grain for 7 years? Right? They were saving it all those years for the 7 years of famine. How did they save it? This is before, vacuum sealed, hermetically sealed, units and whatever. I don't know if that's a thing even for food storage, but whatever. The point is, how do they preserve it? According to the Midrash, which Rashi cites from Bereshit Rabbah, it was due to the soil of the land. The land itself keeps things fresh, that's what it says. So they would put some of the earth within the grain somehow, and that would keep it fresh. All right, let me toggle Rashi off and let's get back inside. Okay. Verse 49, and Joseph gathered grain like the sand of the sea, so numerous, in great abundance, until one stopped counting because there was no number. At some point, they stopped counting how much food they had. because they couldn't, the numbers ran out. They just couldn't count anymore. And Joseph, so that's the business end of it, the running the country piece of it. What about Joseph's personal life? No. What's with the mishpacha? Verse 50, and to Joseph were born 2 sons before the year of the famine set in, whom Asnat, the daughter of Potiphar, the governor of On, bore to him. So he had 2 sons to his wife Asnat. What were their names? I'm sure you want to know. Here we go. Joseph named the firstborn Menashe. I know it says Manasseh, but I'm going with the Hebrew Menashe. For God has caused me to forget, Menashe means to forget, all my toil and all my father's house. Okay, so it's about forgetting. And the second son he named Ephraim. Why Ephraim? For God has made me fruitful, Hephrani, in the land of my affliction. So 2 points. Number 1, I have seen good moments in my life, celebration and good fortune, and that's allowed me to forget all of the trials and tribulations of old, right? The old sorrows, the old wounds are healing. And number 2, I'm fruitful in the land of my affliction. I'm going to speak about these 2 names in Avodah, in our personal divine service, because these are really important themes in each of our lives. It's not just, some ancient names that Joseph gave to his sons. These are life lessons for you and I. But before we get there, I just want to kind of wrap up the stuff about the commerce. Remember, Joseph knew that there was going to be 7 years of famine, and Joseph knew that they needed to save the food for the years of famine. So Joseph oversaw this very fierce taxation, essentially taxation of the agriculture. Anything that grew went through Joseph. He took a cut of everything. Now, obviously, they ate, and they bought and sold on some level, but the vast majority was preserved, and was preserved in a genius way or an ingenious way where it would stay fresh, as we discussed, based on the measures. Either way, the food situation was under control. Joseph was running it. All is good. Let's talk about the names of his 2 sons. We have Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe means I'm no longer in trauma. And Ephraim means I'm successful. Understand the order? Menashe first and then Ephraim. After hardship, after difficulty, step 1 is getting okay. Step 2 is succeeding. So let me share with you what this means for each of us in our own lives. And again, it could be understood there's a wide spectrum. This could be understood on many different levels. But I would say for each of us, it's relevant. You see, each of us, we all have challenges, whether it's, God forbid, trauma or challenges from our youth, or whether it's current challenges. So the first step is to climb out from the place of deficit. I don't mean financial, I mean from a place of, spiritual, emotional, psychological deficit, and get to a place where we're on even ground, where we're, back to ground level, where we're not drowning in the challenge, but we're above water. That's step 1. Step 1 is Menashe. Menashe means the troubles are gone and it's cleared up. That requires a lot of work on every level, right? On whatever level we're talking about. And again, I'm not giving you specifics because each of us, we're all meant to apply Torah in our own way. So I don't want to do the applying. I'll let you do the applying, right? So whatever the challenge is for you and for me, it's Ephraim means the firstborn. Menashe. Menashe is getting to an okay place, getting to a good place, overcoming the immediate challenge and getting to a good. And that's Menashe, forgetting the challenge. And what's Ephraim? So much deeper. The second son, the second step is transforming the deficit into a profit, transforming the liability into an asset. It's not just The challenge, I've been able to overcome the challenge, but the challenge itself has been the greatest catalyst for growth. The darkness is not just no longer present, but it's been transformed to the greatest light precisely because of the darkness. And Joseph, in his life, he experienced both. Number one, he was able to get over the challenges that he was met with. But more importantly than just getting over the challenges, he was able to succeed beyond anyone's wildest imagination. He was able to succeed precisely because of the situation he was put into. Had he remained at home in the land of Canaan, land to be known later as Israel, at home with his family, with his father and his brothers, again, anything could have happened, right? He could have taken a vacation to Cairo and met Pharaoh on the Nile River or whatever. But you know what? On the ground, he probably doesn't end up being viceroy of Egypt. And so the second level is not just I'm okay now, but I've exploited in a good way. I've exploited the challenge to the greatest opportunity, to the greatest success. That's a higher level. That requires a lot more work to not only be okay, but to utilize the challenge as a springboard toward greater success that I could never have achieved had I not had the challenge beforehand. And that's ultimately what we are called upon to strive toward. Will we ever get there? That's another question. Or will we fully get there? Your mileage may vary, but that's at least the goal. The goal is, number one, we got to step by step. Step one is push away the darkness. Step two is jump up on the darkness or climb up because of the darkness to a greater place. Does this make sense? I know I'm keeping it vague. Does this make sense? Yes? Okay. So it's not just getting a computer back. It's getting a better computer than you started with, right? I'm saying, I know it's a simple example, but you mentioned it before, but we're never meant to just get back. I mean, I can't say never meant to. That is step one. Step one is getting back to where we were. Step two is going above and beyond. That it's a beautiful names with a beautiful message. By the way, they became tribes in their own right. I'm going to share with you something. I hope it's not complicated. It'll just take another minute or two. We all know there are 12 tribes, right? Yeah. And typically when we count the tribes, we count the tribe of Levi. But now when Israel was being divided, because the Levites, right, Mark? The Levites did not get a piece of land in the land of Israel, right? They were living in special cities that from the other territories, and they were working the temple. They were not meant to own land, according to biblical law in ancient Egypt. So how many tribe states was the land of Israel divided into? You would think 11, because one of the tribes doesn't get a section. No, 12. Where do you get 12? You had 12 sons, 12 tribes, minus 1 is 11. What kind of math is this? Jacob, before he passed away, says to Joseph, your sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, the ones that we just read about their birth, they are to me like my own children, like Reuven and Shimon. In other words, the tribe of Joseph splits into two tribes. You with me? Joseph is the father, right? Joseph is one tribe. Joseph is two tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim. That's your 12. So when the land of Israel is divided into 12 tribes, I don't know why I'm doing 12 or whatever, right? 12 tribes. It's the 11 sons, not Levi. Sorry, it's 12 sons minus Levi, 11, but dividing Joseph into two, Ephraim and Manasseh, that's how you get your 12. So really, if you want to add everything together, you heard it from me first, but I'll deny it. There were 13 tribes. We still call them 12. 12 original sons of Jacob. But when it's kind of like when Levi is counted, you just count Joseph as one. But when Levi is out of the picture for like land division purposes, then you do split Joseph into two and you have your 12 tribes again. My point is that these two sons of Joseph were very special. And not only that, the custom is when parents bless their sons, they bless them that they should be like Menashe and Ephraim. Menashe and Ephraim. These were the first Jewish kids born outside of Israel. Think about it. From the time that Abraham went to Israel, Isaac was born there, Jacob was born there, right? The 12 tribes were born there. Everyone was born, the Jewish people, or the Jewish family, whatever you want to call them then, the Abrahamic family, they were all Israeli or Canaanites, whatever, they were all in Israel, Holy Land. Later to be known as Holy Land. The first kids born outside, Menashe and Ephraim. That's us, right? Made in the USA. It's like, it's us, it's diaspora, it's the diaspora Jew. It's the outside, the insular sphere of holiness Jew. And what's the message? Number one, get to an okay place. And number two, reveal the greatest light precisely in the place that's not obviously holy, that's outside of Israel. That's why these two kids, Menashe and Ephraim, are really the template for our blessings for our kids. We bless our kids, be like them, be like Menashe and Ephraim. You're not born necessarily in a realm of holiness, right? I don't mean the family, good people. I mean, we're not born necessarily in an aura of spirituality. No one's born in a temple. I mean, whatever, usually. But our calling is to be like Ephraim and Menashe. Hope that makes sense. All right. So what we learned today is, let me just recap, and then we'll do some questions and conversation. So to recap, so today we explored the appointment of Joseph as viceroy, the pomp and circumstance, the wedding, or the shidduch, right, the marriage to his former boss's daughter, an accuser's daughter, and his children that were born, and a little bit about how he went around preserving the food of Egypt for the years of famine. Okay, hope the lessons that I shared along the way were meaningful and resonant. All right, let's do a few questions. Donna, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So can you elaborate on how Joseph impacted the Pharaoh spiritually? So you mentioned that, Pharaoh said, he said God instructed Joseph, and that's unusual for him to speak that way. I mean, and was the Pharaoh worshiping idols at that time? And did he change?
100%. I mean, it's not, you don't even have to go to Jewish sources. If you go into the National Museum of History or whatever it's called in Manhattan, I went there. I took a few years ago, our teen group, our C-Teen Chabad teen group, we every year we did a Shabbaton in New York City, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. And I probably have pictures on my phone. You see like the old writings, hieroglyphics, whatever you want to call them, of Egypt. They have all sorts of gods with animal heads and human features. And it's a very, they believed in all sorts of powers. I mean, on another level, they were worshipped the Nile River. Even the Nile was a god to them. So Pharaoh was all about, I mean, I don't even know what they called it then, polytheism or paganism. I don't know what term, I don't know what modern term would apply. Sorry?
Joseph was just another source for him to get inspiration.
Correct. Yeah. So my point is like this. So the culture was steeped in idolatry, what we would call idolatry. I don't know what they call it then, but not monotheism. So for Pharaoh to say, wow, God is speaking through you, for him even to say the word Elohim is already, in that moment, he went back and served his other stuff, but in that moment,
he was transformed a bit.
In that moment, there was a recognition. And it only happened because Joseph said, it's not me. And who does that? Who does that? Who says it's not me? Everyone wants to present themselves as the expert, as the guru, as the wise one, as the talented one. Everyone is trying to position themselves as, because everyone wants the honor and the pat on the back. Everyone wants the credit. Joseph says consistently, it's not me, it's God. This is his one chance. And he's talking about God to Pharaoh. You're gonna blow your chance. But he was sincere. He meant it. That's why both Potiphar's wife when she accused him, and I mentioned this in a previous session, I think, like months ago. She said, you brought us a Hebrew lad to sport with us, or to mock us, or to mock me, or whatever it is. And Pharaoh, when the butler comes to Pharaoh, he says, there was a Hebrew lad with me in the prison that I forgot to mention, who does dreams. He's known as the Hebrew. He's known as a Jew, essentially. Whatever they would call him then, Hebrew. An Abrahamic fellow. He wore his identity on his sleeve. He never hid. He never was ashamed. He proclaimed it as a source of pride and not as a source of shame or embarrassment. That's very commendable. It's commendable even today, let alone 3,500 years ago. Today, when Jews are well respected, and you could have, there's nothing standing in America, there's nothing standing in anyone's way, right? Essentially. And it's hard for us sometimes to wear our identity on our sleeve, let alone 3,500 years ago. So what he did was incredible. And when he talks about God, Pharaoh starts talking about God. Yeah, he went back home and I'm sure, did his thing, but in the moment, very impressive. All right, good. Questions, Scott? Mark, what you got?
Yeah, quick question. Ephraim and Manasseh were never slaves.
Correct.
Is that the reason they're elevated above the others? In other words, why we say be as Ephraim and Manasseh, because what's not being said is because they were never slaves and did very well.
Well, they were never slaves. The truth is, all of the Jews were never slaves until well after Joseph passed away. In other words, that original generation of Jews, remember, the Egyptian experience lasted for over 200 years. So that first generation, they were not enslaved. They lived separate in Ephraim and Manasseh and all the grandkids. They were living a comfortable life in their own separate little ghettoed area in Goshen, but they were living separate. It's only after Joseph passed away in that generation that then Pharaoh started putting the squeeze on the Jewish people. You should know, I'm not minimizing it. I'm just saying that the entire slavery experience was only about, 8 decades of slavery. I'm not minimizing it. I'm not saying only to minimize it. I'm just putting it in context. It's about 86 years of slavery. So, and the whole experience was 210 years. So by that time, Ephraim and Manasseh were likely deceased. They were never slaves. That generation was never enslaved. When Joseph's brothers came down and their kids, they were fine. They had yeshiva. They lived a separate life.
I was just thinking that because they were the children of a viceroy, then their descendants would have been earmarked not to become slaves like everyone else did.
No, once it started, it didn't discriminate like that in a good way or in a bad way, whatever. There's one thing that our sages mention is that the tribe of Levi, right, your tribe, was never enslaved. Why? Because when Pharaoh, so here's how it evolved. We're getting a little bit ahead of the story, but when Joseph passed, when the original generation kind of passed on, and now it's the new generation and whatever, they're now in Egypt, they're born in Egypt. It's like this whole different dynamic. So Pharaoh says, you guys should be loyal to the country and help build buildings, or I don't know if it was pyramids or not, whatever. Some people say pyramids, some people say not pyramids. They get involved in the project of building our infrastructure, and you be part of it, show your patriotism and be part of it. Well, that's how they eventually got sucked into this whole slavery thing, is they started off volunteering, and then it turned on specifically on the Jewish people. But it began with a spirit of cooperation. Well, there was one tribe that never cooperated because they were the priests. They were the spiritual ones, tribe of Levi. That's why our sages tell us Moses and Aaron were able to walk freely in and out to Pharaoh to speak with him. In the story of the Exodus, right? They come to Pharaoh and they let my people go. How were they able to walk around? Weren't they slaves? They weren't slaves. The whole tribe of Levi, they were the priests amongst the Jewish people. They were the teachers. I don't know why I did that. They were the teachers, the spiritual ones. This is before the temple, obviously, but that was after the Exodus. But they were even then kind of like the spiritual elite. And Egyptians also had their spiritual elite that didn't get their hands dirty with stuff. So they were never enslaved. But Manasseh and Ephraim from the tribe of Joseph, even though their Zayda, their grandfather, was Joseph, The Torah tells us that a new king arose over Egypt who didn't know about Joseph. And the commentators say either he really didn't know or he made himself like he didn't know, right? Were there no history books, or did he say, I don't care? So what? What have you done for me lately? You're just a thorn on my side. All these Jews, you know? Anyway, history has told us, has showed us many times how there's no guarantee for longevity or long-term appreciation, even when something really special is done. For that generation or two, it lasted. And then at some point, it's like, no, I don't like you guys. It's not only the Jewish story, which it has been, right? But it's everyone's story, right? We all can relate to it in our own lives. Memory. All right, good. It's great to see everybody. I want to wish you all a happy Hanukkah. Oh, one thing. Don't forget, today this is it. It's ending tonight at 10 p.m. This is the day for our end of your matching campaign. I know some of you have already donated. Some of you have made pledges. If you haven't yet, if you haven't had the opportunity, please consider helping us with our campaign. It's very vital to help us keep on going and keep on inspiring the community. Here's the direct URL. Well, it'll redirect you straight to the page. Intown Jewish Academy.org/light. The campaign is called Light Up the Night. So it's Intown Jewish Academy.org/light. I don't know, / or /. I feel like people make that up. Just the /, the normal / that everyone uses. All right, so Intown Jewish Academy.org/light. And we will see you see you tomorrow, but very important. So campaign, please help us out. Regarding tomorrow, I checked the weather, 39 degrees and raining. We don't have canopies either. So it's like 75% chance of rain. I'm a brave guy, but I think we'll Zoom this week. I think we'll just Zoom it, and then we'll pick it up who's got next week. The thing that I know about Atlanta is good weather's around the corner, so we should be fine. All right, so tomorrow, don't order from Spicy Beach. If you did place an order, you can cancel it. I'm sure they'll do that. Otherwise, we'll see you soon. Oh, tonight is Talmud, and also keep in mind the campaign. Also, if you have donated to the campaign already or pledged, please share it with others. It's really a benefit and a blessing for us to have as much participation as possible to help us continue the good work that we do in the community and beyond. All right, thank you again. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you either later.
Thank you. See you later.
Bye, everybody.
Can you ask the Talmud teacher to send us the whatever material he's going to show up?
Like the first page that did that said, this is Talmud, this is Torah. When he said
oh my gosh, I totally forgot to do that. Let me voice note him right now. And then I'm going to send out an email as soon as I get it.
Yeah, and if he has more tonight,
a link to the English and a link to the English translation.
Good. So I'm going to do three things. Okay, I'm going to do three things. Number one, I'm going to ask him for the PowerPoint, the sheets, so that everyone can see it. 2, the link to that Talmud online, and 3, I'll send out the Zoom for tonight.
Okay, and if he has any, material, he's going to show that.
Oh, and any other new material tonight. Okay, good. All right, let me
or reference, to the website. So just to...
Perfect. I am going to reach out to him right now. Okay, awesome. All right, super cool.
Okay.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. We'll see you. Take care.
Bye.
Have a great day. Bye, everybody.